want to take a quick second to talk to anybody watching this that's interested in starting a government contracting business or starting a new profession in government contracting. The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high-paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video. There we go. No one can hear me because I got the mic muted. All right. I'm going to recap the week here. I was going to have a video premiere tonight featuring Kevin Kivlin of GSA. We had an awesome conversation yesterday. I say of GSA, he just left GSA, subject matter expert. I've worked with him for years. I worked with him when I was on the Air Force side in acquisitions. And I now continued our friendship. And now that he has transitioned on, he's doing some advising, really knows the ins and outs of not only how to utilize GSA if you're on it, how to sell, what are your best strategies, the application process, but really where's GSA going, right? So we have talked about Trump's executive order, President Trump's executive order, talking about utilizing GSA more for certain types of goods and services. So we'll get into that during the conversation today, some of the trends that we're seeing in federal acquisitions. We've had extensive conversations about other transaction authority, which is going to be utilized more and more for software related purchasing, which I think is a good thing. Other transaction authority is a faster way for the government to purchase, and it's a faster way for us on the other side of that. If we're trying to sell to the government, whether you're on a sales team, you own a business, or if you have a consulting business, like I do, like a lot of the people in GovClose are running, being able to sell to the government in a faster way, a more streamlined fashion is always a good thing. So looking forward to seeing some advancements as far as that's concerned. Some other things that have been discussed this week. We looked a little at proposal writing yesterday. So one of our certified GovClose advisors, Desmond Daniels, sat down with us to give a little on what his thought process is for how to write a government or a proposal for a government contract. I thought that was really interesting because it's a different way. He has a different way of thinking. A lot of us can get lost in the complexities of government contracting, right? And there's a lot of them. He has a fresh perspective on the way he thinks about how he's approaching the proposal itself, the type of format that he's using. What is the mindset that you should have, when you're approaching government contracting? So all of that coming up. Let me just make sure that my chat features are working here. Okay, if anyone can hear me, just I'm going to throw a test in the chat here, see if we can see that. I'm not sure if that's going out to everyone or not. Let me just run one check here real quick. We're going to invest in the Marine Corps. All right, can you guys hear me? Still nothing? All right, can you guys hear me? Still nothing? A little bit of a delay. Okay. I see. Dry Creek says test good. Thank you, sir. Yeah, something's going on with my software here. I went into YouTube and I'm able to chat from there. Here we go. Loud and clear. Sweet. Well, thanks, Dry Creek Ops, for coming on here. Thanks to everyone else. So I thought what we would do is start with proposal writing. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that Desmond was putting out there as far as ways to think of how we can engage with the government. You're saying you don't hear. Oh, Nate, thanks. Appreciate that, buddy. Nate hears me. And then we can kind of break that apart. I can get some of your comments on that. If we have time, I'll get into some of what the conversation I had with Kevin Kivlin of GSA centered around. Kevin really gave some interesting insights as to what we should be thinking about. I'm going to give you at least the top level there. So if you are interested or wondering if you need a GSA schedule, considering the potential massive increase that we're hearing about, who's going to be affected, what do we really need to think about? He covers a lot of that. So we will get into that as well. Let's see here if we can pull up a clip of the interview I did with Desmond yesterday, and then we can discuss.
Even start writing a proposal, my main thought is I want to make it as easy as possible for the government to say yes to me.
You've won several contracts from writing proposals, and I think you have a unique approach to this, and the way you explain it is a way that people can understand.
The first mistake that I've made, and also other small businesses that I've worked with have made, is assuming that the government knows who you are. I was working with a small.
That's a big one there, is assuming the government knows who you are. Now, I don't ever try to make that assumption if I'm approaching the government from a proposal writing perspective, right? But Nate's going to go on here to describe some of the clients, or Des is going to describe some of the clients that he's worked with, basically with the attitude, oh, hey, I've been in business for 20 years. The government should know who I am, right? Now, I have seen on the government side, companies, big companies, approach it kind of cocky, right? Like, hey, the contract has to come to me, right? But often the problem is that even if I want to award the contract to a certain company, and even if that company has done all of the work ahead of the solicitation, like they should have been doing, right? If they, maybe there was a source of thought, they were meeting with us, they were influencing. If they mess up the proposal, or they're not, filling out the sections they're supposed to, if they're skipping the format, all of this proposal is going to be reviewed. And often you have different people from different teams reviewing that, right? So let's go on here to see what Nate's saying.
Businesses that they said they installed playgrounds across the nation. So they've been doing it for over 25 years. And I was developing a proposal, and I asked them, like, okay, what's the process? What's your process of, taking a piece of land and developing a playground out of it? And the owner was like, well, we'll just do it like we've always done it for the last 20 years. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get you have the reputation.
Yeah, I mean, the details matter, right? So if you're writing a proposal to the government, you can't just say, hey, I don't have enough time to do this. We're going to do it. We've been doing it well for 20 years. The government's going to put us on contract. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. We have to put the time in when we're writing that proposal.
But that's not going to win us a contract. So I think for this one, it's just a mindset of just going into it, just treating every proposal like it's the first intro. So assume nothing, especially the federal government. Assume nothing, because there may even be multiple people involved in evaluating your contract, people who have no idea about what you even do, and they need someone to fulfill the need.
That's good advice. I mean, and just for anyone listening.
Yeah, I'll spare you from what I'm about to say, but, just kind of summing it up there, don't assume that the government knows who you are. Make sure we're filling out each of the blocks, and you assume also that, when we're looking at each of the separate requirements that the government has, that we are writing our answer to that in its completion, right? So another problem, another mistake that companies have is they will often jam a bunch of stuff into the executive summary at the beginning, right? Or maybe to the synopsis at the end, or, there's other sections where you might be putting your past performance. And this proposal could be getting broken into 8 different parts, right? So if I'm reviewing part number 4, I might need to have the big picture and everything else included in that. So that is really important here. Des is a recent graduate from our program, certified in GovClose. So he's been through all of our training on how to sell to the government, managing pipelines, advanced strategies. We go really in depth into other transaction authority, GSA, influencing requirements. How do we meet, exceed quota? But when Des came to us, he has already been a successful business owner. He's already won contracts, so he's already a really great proposal writer. So, it was just a no-brainer for me to get him on the YouTube channel and the podcast to talk a little bit more about this.
They can't score anything about you.
Questions, right? So let's just say, and this is because your proposal's much more detailed, and everything that you get from these questions will actually give the solution to the requirement that they're looking to fill. So let's just go back to the contractor shall paint the walls of the office, right? Let's just say it's very simple like that. So we can take that requirement, and then we can just start building out maybe 5 to 10 questions. Well, what is your process for prepping the walls before painting? What type of paint will you use? Why do you use that paint instead of this other paint? Maybe it lasts, 10 years, or maybe it dries quicker, Well, what other equipment do you use? Do you use rollers, or maybe you use sprayers? Why do you use the sprayer over the roller? It's like, we can, as long as we're like really curious, well, I approach it like really curious. Well, why do you do this? Why do you?
Yeah, it's a really good technique that he's got here, where he's breaking up each part of the. Looks like one of my connections got lost here, but he's breaking up each part of the proposal, and he's generating a list of questions that he has about it, and he's answering them. So he's basically doing a questions and an answer section, which I think is really interesting. It's really a great way to approach this. So we can now include all of that in his response, right?
You do this. How do you do this? We can take that one requirement and we can build out maybe 2 paragraphs worth of information that will answer that one requirement. Now, imagine if we do that for every section of the scope of work. Now, we don't want to have, 20 pages of information. That's not really what we're aiming for. But what we can do is we know that everything that we get from that requirement, or all of the answers that we get from those questions, will answer directly to how we're going to get that job done.
This is why.
Yeah, that's all great stuff here. And by the way, guys, I'm going to put a link in the comments. So if you're watching this on, let's see, probably either LinkedIn or YouTube or potentially Facebook, you should be able to get this link. Basically, if you want he put a proposal writing checklist together, you can download that. Okay. And I'm going to I'll verify that this is going out to LinkedIn as well, if you're watching there. But it's really great because he breaks down the kinds of questions that you should be asking. And then just his general philosophy, right, about how he approaches the proposal writing process. By the way, he's got some really interesting quotes that he goes through in here. And he put it in some different ways that, I hadn't thought of in approaching this. So here we go. I am going to have to add these manually, I think. Yep. I'm going to have to add these manually. Here we go. Okay. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, then you should get that in the comments now. For some reason, my streaming software is not, it didn't connect on that one. All right. Cool. Let's keep taking a look here.
Do this, and then you follow it up with, but why? So then it's like, when you put it together, it's almost like explaining to a person who has no idea of what you do, and it'll allow them to be able to kind of follow the story from step 1 to step, whatever step it is. Let's just say this, right?
No, that makes sense. Okay, so anyone watching this that wants Dez's checklist, just drop a comment in the video, and then I will put a link out to you.
Yeah. And so you guys got that now. If you're watching YouTube, you should have it. I just dropped it in LinkedIn as well. And I have no idea if Facebook is getting that, but here, we'll try it one more time. You want the checklist? Bam, there you go. Yeah, so you should be able to just click on the link and download it. By the way, Des, if you need a proposal writer, Desmond is absolutely someone that you can hire to help you through that process. It's already won multiple contracts. Really, really
This will be gold nugget number 2.
Here
so
we
you
go.
get 2 things from this video. One is ask questions and get the format right.
Okay.
We always know that every opportunity is different and every opportunity is going to have a different format. But unstructured proposals is going to make it very hard for, honestly, me and for the evaluators, because if I'm not following a certain format, sometimes I can be leaving things out, which I have done like very early on, and I've learned this mistake the hard way. So my solution to this is put it back the way you found it. So let me kind of just unpack that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. What does that mean?
So, well, my mama used to always tell me, put it back the way you found it. Don't make me go looking for it. Just give it back the way you took it. Right?
I know. This is what I'm talking about, man.
I
You
love
have
that.
to really.
Yeah, I love that. Put it back the way you found it. You know, what he's basically saying there is you look at the proposal structure or the solicitation, RFP, RFQ, whatever it is that the government's putting out there. You can look at the language in there. You can look at the structure of the proposal. And he's like, instead of recreating the wheel, right, we can basically copy that. He's going to go way more in depth, but we can basically copy that and use the same words that the government's using. And we can throw those words back out at them. Like, we're not inventing a new structure. We're not inventing a new format. And I just thought it was really, it caught me off guard when he said, you know, the way I look at formatting and structure and everything is, you know, mom always said, put it back the way you found it. Right. So he's just writing this proposal in the exact same way that the solicitation was written. And by the way, there's going to be a lot of specifications in a federal like RFP, RFQ, and some of them are going to tell you about, you know, the type of font and how many pages, and there's going to be there's going to be sections and whatnot that you got to put in there, but we'll get into that. But you really want to be thorough when you are approaching this, and yeah, put it back the way you found it. Absolutely. Oh, that's funny. It's great.
Interesting. I'm starting to see a process or a pattern. What I started doing was I'll just mirror the scope of work or the solicitation in my proposal. So for example, if the scope of work has a section that says section 2.0 wall painting requirements.
Yeah.
In my proposal, I'm going to have a section that says 2.0 wall painting requirements.
Absolutely. Smart.
When they're coming back through the proposal, like, I'm using their own language, right? I'm not going to change anything about the title of that section. The only thing that's going to be changed is the details that's going to follow underneath that section. That's going to be my solution for that requirement. So it's going to be very easy for them to find. So if multiple people were involved in writing up this solicitation, or if it's just one, you know, acquisitions officer that wrote up this solicitation, I'm going to give it back to him exactly how he gave it to me. So when he's going through and evaluating, he can see, okay, wall painting here, framing here. It's very easy for him to find. I don't want him to go looking for things, right? Like I said in the beginning, I want to make it so easy for you to say yes to me. That's a little detail where it's okay. They're making my job so much easier by having it mapped out the way that I like it. Like, he wrote it up this way for a reason. That's how his brain works. I'm going to work with you. I'm like, here, take it back the way you gave it to me. Right?
Oh, yeah. Dude, awesome.
Yeah, Ed Milet always says the mind moves towards what it's most familiar with. So I think about that all the time. So
who said that?
Like Ed Milet. He's like the motivational speaker ever in the world.
Really? Ed Milet?
Ed Milet.
I'm gonna have to look this guy up. I haven't heard of Hormozy. Yes, he's a little.
Yeah, everybody knows Alex Hormozy, man. And that guy is something special.
Okay, so this guy Ed Milet said,
you guys don't know who he's talking about there. Hormozy's he's a business kind of guru that you'd find on YouTube. He's got he's actually got some really good books if you are in selling services or selling, anything really. I think it was $1 Million Offers or something, the one that I read.
Right.
The mind moves towards what it is most familiar with.
Yeah, man. And that is true too. That is really true. It was funny because I was just thinking about, I was listening to a music list in iTunes I was listening to, I don't know, the old singer, he's not alive anymore, but from Soundgarden and Audio Slave. Anyway, he's got a bunch of songs out, but I was like picking songs that I know I've heard before. And if I started and it didn't sound familiar to me, I'd skip to the next song. I'd skip to something that I knew. Oh yeah, I know this one. I know this one. So you're right. That is interesting. So it's the same thing, right? So now the person,
Even if I change one word like wall painting instead of requirement, let's just say, I don't even know. I'm just making stuff up right now. That's not what you're changing. I don't want to change because.
Yeah, basically what he's saying is use the same words that they're using, right? I mean, it makes so much sense. You're giving it back to them the way they put it in there, and you're giving them something familiar, right? So, and that's kind of where I was going to. Like, if you've heard a song before, like, you're more likely to want to listen to it again, right? If I'm reading a bunch of proposals and I've got 3 of them are written like completely different, but one of them I'm going to be attracted to because it's the exact way that we put the solicitation out. So that is a very smart way to approach this.
That's the type of verbiage that they like to use. So I'm going to use that same verbiage with them just to make their lives just a tiny bit easier.
Yep. No, and it's that subliminal thing, right? That giving it back to them the way they found it, it's going to be familiar with them, feel familiar to them. They're going to probably gravitate toward your response better. And if it's,
You have to have this section written up this particular way. So follow the instructions that they give you, if they even give you, because sometimes they're very vague. It'll just say,
that's the worst.
Yeah, technical summary. It's okay. Well, where do we go from here?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't have, this works very well if you don't have a format actually laid out for you. If they're just asking for a technical summary or technical capability, then you can use the actual solicitation to help you format your response.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, that's perfect. That's awesome. Okay, sweet. So we've been through the first 3. What's number 4? Can't even count today.
So number 4 is, I believe we've probably touched on this before, like just a conversation that we've had before, but weak past performance. So, and I don't mean weak in a way like you haven't done enough work. I mean weak presentation of your past performance.
Gotcha.
So I've worked with a lot of small businesses where when we're building their past performance, they'll just give me a generic list of past contracts that they've, that they've had or that they've completed. The problem with this is that we have to think like a customer, right? Me and my wife, we've been traveling for the last year, and every time we go to a new spot, she's always checking the reviews and seeing what other people are saying. So we want enough context like that when we're presenting our proposal to the government.
Right.
Oh, because the government, they're using this past performance to evaluate the risk associated with hiring your company.
Yeah.
Right? So we want to give them enough detail. So not just giving them like, hey, we've done business with the VA, the HHS, and the DOD. We want to see what impact and results that you've gotten or achieved in these contracts, right? I think the easiest way, and this is not a new concept, the easiest way to show impact and show results is use numbers. So
So true. So true. When, I don't know anybody watching, if you spent any time in the military, when we were doing things like performance reports, you're taking a sentence and you're trying to cram as much impact into that sentence as possible. All right. So this is what I did. This is how I did it. This is the result. But not just, hey, I mowed the lawn, I used 3 lawnmowers, and then the grass was short, right? What we're actually looking for is when you start putting the details in there, the numbers, and he's using this for proposal writing, right? It could be, instead of just, I mowed the lawn, I used 3 lawnmowers, now the grass is short. It could be, mowed, 15,000 square feet of, this type of grass on Hanscom Air Force Base, revolutionized the mowing process, or used, environmentally friendly lawnmowers, reduced toxic emissions by 14%. And then you're going to have, some type of result. But you can use metrics. Hey, save the Air Force, $45 million by, using a special type of fuel or something, right? So you get my point though, right? We're using money, we're using numbers, we're not just talking in generalities. And that's what a lot of people do. And if you've read anything where they're talking in generalities like that, it's never going to have the impact that it does if you actually carefully look at what you're writing and submit. Writing's everybody doesn't like to do it. Everybody has different skill sets. But when it comes down to writing a proposal, you can't just wing it, right? Like, with rare exception, unless you're a company that, or you represent a company that has something so unique, nobody else could possibly do it, then you might be able to submit something that, isn't perfect. But, and he's going to go on to say here, right? Sometimes there are Easter eggs within the solicitation designed to weed out the companies that just aren't going to pay attention, right? So, Des, if we keep going in this video, Des would tell you that that he won one of his contracts because he was one of the only companies that included a reps and certs section, that it was the exact format that the government wanted. A lot of companies skipped it, right? And so what that told the government is, okay, the companies that skip this, they're going to be a pain in the ass after they're on contract, right? Because there's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork in government contracting. They want people that are attention to detail, that are going to do the thing, right? And so this company, just by doing the proposal right, is demonstrating that they can follow the rules, they have attention to detail, and you're demonstrating the exact opposite if you're just winging it and flinging it out there. And unfortunately, that happens, more than not. Yeah, Nate. Yep. No, I hear you, man. I don't know. So you're NCO where? Air Force, Army? By the way, guys, you can drop questions in here. Feel free. And we also, depending on when you joined, there is a checklist for the proposal that Desmond put together, which I can get to you. And I will put the link in here again in a bit. Army. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for your service.
I'm familiar with Tom Ellsworth. I'm just quoting everybody today.
You are, man. Well, I don't know Tom Ellsworth. Who's this now?
They call him like the biz doc. He just knows his stuff about business.
Okay.
But he says words talk, numbers scream.
Yeah.
So just if you can plug in some numbers and of course give a bit of context and tell like what you did, what were your processes, how it helped, how it didn't help, maybe don't include that. But
yep, it's such good advice that it's almost like this guy just.
All right, guys, I'm gonna pause here and answer a question real quick. I just posted it in there because some of the places that this is being streamed are not connected. Let's if I can figure this out here. Going to remove that. So the question, this was a simple SAM.gov question. If you guys have been utilizing SAM.gov to find solicitations and whatnot, if you're not paying for something else to do this, they do periodically make changes. And I do get questions sometimes like, hey, I can't find X menu, or hey, how do I do source of sought, or how do I find this? This is one that comes up all the time. So I am just going to bring that up really quickly here. All right. Okay, so just sharing the screen real quick here. And what he was actually asking me for is, he wanted to search and he was looking for some parameters. By the way, everybody's I must have received a dozen questions on this. They're like, hey, I'm over here, I'm in search. How do I find source of sought? How do I find some of the other type of contracting things that are out there, right? So it's really just, you got to come over here and you got to hit contracting. Okay, so when you do that, now I'm going to have a different drop-down menu. As you can see here, I've got notice types. So now I can go into here, I can click source of sought. So now, and for anyone watching that isn't familiar with this, the source of sought, that's going to be where I'm getting a message from the government office that has a requirement and has funding and is going to put a solicitation out, this is where they're looking for some additional information. They might be trying to see what kind of companies can actually do the work, so they can set aside a contracting opportunity for, say, a woman-owned small business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, whatever. They may be deciding what type of contract vehicle to use. A lot of times the government's just trying to figure out what should be in the solicitation, right? Because, they're not going to be the experts on augmented reality or whatever it is that your company does. So this is your opportunity to get in there and say, hey, I think that you should put this in the proposal. You can, and in essence, you're helping the government write it. Now, they're not always going to take your input, but this is what you want to be doing. You want to be setting up meetings. You want to be influencing where you can. And so hopefully this answers that one question. That's where you can find the source of SOT. And then, of course, there's a variety of things that we can do within SAM.gov. Another thing is a lot of people don't know, you can set up an automated search here where if I put in a bunch of parameters, right? So if I'm looking for something specific, I might have to add, a combination of NAICS codes and keywords. And if I log in, you have to sign in to do this, but if I log into my account, then I can save that search. And then instead of having to go through the pain here, because, a lot of people are selling things that are a little bit more complex, right? Once you kind of put that algorithm together where, if I put in, if you're looking for a certain type of software, I could put like metadata tagging, a certain type of data platform, maybe command and control, and I pair that with the product service code. That might be the magic formula where now I know that I'm going to see the solicitations that are going to apply to me. Then I can go in, I can look at it, and instead of having to go in and try to figure it out every time. And that can be very helpful. So again, if anyone has SAM.gov questions, just let us know. And even if you don't, if you have it after this live stream ends, I do review the questions and I will often answer them either in another live stream or we'll put a video out. This, in fact, is how we put a lot of our videos together, right? And so this one in particular, we were reviewing with Desmond on proposal writing. This is because a lot of people are asking questions on, hey, how do I write a proposal, right? What is the framework? How should I be thinking about writing a proposal? So, going through that with him in this video came from some of your comments and questions. And of course, we have a full boat of training at GovClose, and you can go to govclose.com if you want to check that out. Okay, let's go back and take a look at the rest of this interview here with Desmond.
Kind of understood. Let's talk military, right? So the people reading this on the other side, in the military, we're trained to, and by the way, the government, although, there are organizations that aren't the military on the government side, we are trained to write in a very succinct manner. In fact, there's reports that we have to do every year for people who work for us. And it's an interesting lesson in how to do what you're talking about. They change it around every now and then, but let's say 8 to 10 sentences that we have to talk about every single thing that we did during the year. And that could be the basis of how we get promoted. In fact, it will be, right? So how you get promoted, how you get a higher level job, whatever. But the way that's written, to some people, it probably looks like a foreign language, but it's exactly what you said. It is, what did you do? How did you do it? What are the results? And you say numbers, I would just say, give metrics, right? So if you say, I painted the VA facility number 7, and you could say, how did you do it? So I'm trying to think through what the actual structure of that sentence would look like. What did you do? How did you do it? So painted VA facility number 7, used accrual 14, whatever you want to say the results is, finished project in min time, something along those lines. That would be an example. If someone handed that to me, I'd say, okay, kind of got the structure, but we can make that so much better. So now we can start saying, hey, we painted a 75,000 square foot facility, largest in VA, finished 29 days ahead of schedule, saved VA $42,000. That is such a better sentence,
Right.
such a better bullet. And now if you're talking about past performance, and you can do the exact same thing, right? You can, hey, painted. You could even say, if you just want to give a bunch of contract, you might not want to put 20 pages of reviews and past performance, but you might be able to say painted, completed 72 VA painting projects, painting and construction projects, and then go on to give all the metrics you just talked about.
And it's like based on where you started and the sentence that you gave afterward, including the metrics, it just sounds completely different, right? It just presents it in a way that's easily digestible. I mean, I would assume all acquisitions officers know numbers, right? It's easy to say, okay, 70% is 70%. Numbers don't lie. If you completed a project 30 days before schedule versus saying we completed it early. It's like, however, it could be a day early, which is, that could be significant, that could be not, right? But if you say, 30 days early, it's like you can't refute that,
That's right. How much money did you save?
Right.
Or how long did it take you? How many days did it take you? You painted the facility. How big was the facility? It was the biggest of the VD. You're right. Those are the things that really make a difference.
For sure. Exactly. And I'm always looking for those little small things because it's going to be competed regardless. I'm thinking about the competition. Are they doing this? Right. So that's another gold nugget if you're not incorporating that into your proposal already.
Yeah. And you can I can remember doing, I guess we use the painting example, but like when researching it, I would write down every single metric that I could, whether you're pulling it from those contracts or when you're trying to when you realize how powerful those metrics are, I might add up the number of gallons of paint from every single contract that I use, like 142,000 gallons of paint, or maybe I saved 142, saved the environment if that matters on the contract, because I didn't have to use 142,000 gallons of paint. So you can metric out anything and just count the number of hours saved, count the amount of money you saved the government. Hey, paint job lasted 3 times longer than a normal paint job, right? So you could now start estimating the money you saved the government because they didn't have to paint the exterior of the building every 3 years or whatever it is.
For sure.
Okay.
That's 4.
So that was number 4.
Correct.
Perfect. All right. So number 5, this is it here. Before we close it out, the moment everyone's been waiting for. What is it?
It's actually, so number 5 is actually not specific to proposal writing, but it's a mistake that I've seen over and over. And I hear about it everywhere. And it's just simply just not being compliant. So this can show up in the proposal, but it can also show up outside of the proposal. So I was talking to a DOD contracting officer, and we were on the phone, we were talking, he was giving me a debrief. He was like, you guys were one of the few companies that actually completed the reps and certs provisions and they specifically wanted the contractors to fill it out just to see who would pay attention to it.
Okay. For everybody watching, what is reps and certs?
So actually we're probably going to dance around this because it's a very broad.
What do they mean for you in that contract?
So in this contract, actually, I don't even remember what went into this contract, but it's pretty much telling the government what certifications do you have and how you're represented, how your small business is represented.
Okay.
So I pretty much use the same words. Like I said, sometimes it's hard for me to kind of explain things a little bit simply when it's so many details, right? But so for example, it will be things like filling out whether you're a small business or whether you're a woman-owned small business, whether you fit underneath a certain NAICS code or fit underneath the NAICS code rep threshold, things like that. But yeah, I don't know all.
No, but no, that's good. So, you guys, you followed the rules, right? They said, put this section in there and you figured out how to do it and you responded to it. And you're one of the only people that did. And
right. And it was just going through, and it's maybe, 3 or 4 pages, and they wanted, so you can download the reps and certs on SAM.gov because they make you do it for your profile, but they specifically wanted us to hand fill it in, right? On top of it already being present on our SAM.gov profile. And like I said, he just wanted to see who was going to follow the instructions that was laid out in the actual, instructions to offers. So that's
Smart.
just one simple thing, right?
Yeah.
So based on that, he narrowed down who he wanted to work with. Did you follow instructions or did you not?
Smart.
And we were the only people that followed instructions.
Yeah. I mean, because
What?
it's the government, right? In the government, paperwork matters. And the guy on the other side doesn't want to have to do your job for you. So, yeah, I'm not going to fill this out. I've been doing this for 20 years. Or it's also a way of seeing, hey, are they going so fast that they're not even reading this thing and just sending us like this generic proposal? So, no, that's great advice. Great advice. Parting thoughts. Anything else that didn't encapsulate in the 5 biggest mistakes that companies make? Which, by the way, we could also say these are the 5 things you should do based on the 5 mistakes, right?
Yeah, for sure. And for the compliance thing, so my process is, and it's very generic, very basic. Before I once I decide that I am going after an opportunity, I'm making a checklist and I'm going through everything because different contracting officers like to put requirements in the strangest places. So I've seen them write requirements in the SF 1449. In the pricing block. I'm like, why are you writing this here? This should be in section L or whatever,
Yeah.
So sometimes in the scope of work, they'll say maybe copy of the insurance needs to be included in your proposal. So it's even if you're looking in the instructions to offers or in the evaluation section, you could still be uncompliant if you don't catch that little
Sure.
requirement that they put in the scope of work, or maybe even somewhere in the SF 1449 where they like to put random requirements sometimes. Maybe I don't know enough to why they do that, but
Well, hey, I mean, regardless, this video is not for professional government contracting, executives that are out there or people on the government side for contracting out. This video is for small businesses that are going after contracts and are learning how to write proposals, or consultants, right? Or people that write proposals or have to write proposals and they want to learn a little bit more. Maybe this is something that they want to do. That's what this is aimed at. So you just saying that, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of people.
yeah. And like I said, I think that would kind of just close it all off. Make sure you're really covering your bases. Check everywhere to see if there's any must or shall or include this in your proposal. It would just help just scanning it before you even get started on the opportunity. And then also while you're developing your proposal, and then also rechecking that checklist before you submit your proposal.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. This episode has been amazing. I think I'm trying to decide what my favorite quote of yours is going to be. Mama said, put it back the way you found it. Or was that the exact quote? Or
something like that.
Yeah,
Something like
or just be curious when you're going through this. If anyone wants to check out the Colonel Orndorff episode, they can. He would always say, his closer was always, read the question, answer the question, right? Read the question, answer the question. Much like what you're saying, keep it simple. Right?
Yep. Read the question,
Follow
answer the question. That is
they
for
have
sure.
in-
All right. So this has been basically a quick recap of the conversation that I had with Desmond. He did an awesome job putting together his checklist for you guys, which I've dropped the link in the comments and you can grab it. And if you don't see it for some reason, if you come to this late, you can just hit me up. You can either email me or look in the YouTube comments, because I usually people will come in there and I'll post. If there's a link to a checklist, and we've put a bunch of them out lately, just some overview guides that people are interested in having, then you can grab that there. So moving on, let's see here. Currently around 4:15 on a Friday. Everyone likes to talk government contracting on Friday night, right before everything starts. But I want to give you a little bit on the conversation I had with Kevin, and I may be able to pull up some clips of that interview. I will release the full interview next week. We covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of ground on the history of GSA. I mean, and just for you guys that don't know, GSA, there's some confusion around GSA, right? Because we understand it as a few different things. And by the way, you guys might be experts, a few of you watching this, but a lot of businesses, a lot of sales executives, a lot of people in general, especially if they're in the government contracting space, GSA is a federal organization, right? A federal agency. But GSA is more often referred to because of the contracts or contract vehicles associated with it. I would say GSA is most commonly referred to, if you've heard the term, GSA schedules. And a GSA schedule, right, is a type of contract essentially that you can apply to be on. Now, Kevin goes into this in way more detail than I could give you. He spent, I think 20 years plus in GSA. He worked in the Public Building Service. He worked in the FAS. But if you're a company, if, the US government right now buys things in certain ways, right? They can't just put you on contract. They have to have a way to put you on contract. One of those ways is a contract vehicle. But GSA and the different contracts that they own are, especially with things like supplies and some services, have been used by different federal agencies to do the buying. So in other words, GSA is kind of like a middleman between, let's say, one federal agency and then the company that's actually doing the selling. Now, it gets way more complex than that. But, let's say, for instance, when I was in the Air Force running a acquisitions branch, right? If I needed to put a company on contract for whatever reason, services, and let's say that we didn't have a way to put that company on contract, right? But they were on GSA, they applied and they were on this GSA schedule. Well, then I could potentially use that GSA schedule to put them on contract. You're essentially already vetted when you're on the vehicle. And so GSA, basically you can utilize their contracts because there's a ton of them, right? There's multiple agency contracts. There are GWACs. There's a lot of different, there are vehicles that every agency that can use, in other words. And so they can do the contracting for an agency, or they can, you can use their contract vehicle. Now, President Trump recently signed a memo saying that basically GSA was going to be utilized a lot more. And I believe that GSA's original intention was to centralize procurement. We go through these cycles where we're trying to reform the acquisitions process and have over the past few hundred years over and over again. And, when GSA was established, I think it had a grander vision than it actually ended up being utilized for. A lot of the agencies want to retain a lot of control over what they buy. Now, what Kevin will go on to describe in the video is that if you are a company that has a service or product that's not mission essential, I guess you could say, or directly supporting the mission, and they're going to try to use GSA more to be the purchasing mechanism for those type of services and products. Okay. So now there's a ton of gray area in there. And by the way, things can change. But he's probably the closest thing that we're going to have right now to really getting some insight on how this is going to affect you, right? So I guess the way that I would think about that is if I was performing a service, if I was a services company and I was, in a intel unit that was, directly working with like reconnaissance aircraft that were out there. And so like they needed me and my team in there, that might not be affected, right? But if you were maybe landscaping services, maybe we're seeing, because it's not directly, supporting that mission, it's maybe not considered mission critical. Well, now maybe we see an increased use of GSA there. Now, my fear for companies is that especially for companies that have been selling for a while, you're selling to one office for, the past 5 years, and maybe they're putting you on contract using simplified acquisitions, maybe through a BPA or something. And then they're going to switch to GSA. We don't really know how this is all going to play out, except there's one thing I do know, and that is that it takes a long time to get on that GSA schedule. It could take 6 months. It could take a year to get a GSA schedule. So if the office you've been selling to switches and you haven't prepared ahead of time, let's just say if they were going to use a schedule, you need to be on that in order to have a shot without having to partner or subcontract to somebody that already has it, right? So that's really where I am going with that. Let me see here. I think we can bring a clip up now. I will take a look. And feel free to fling any of your questions into the comment section. Here we go.
services, which is the other big part of GSA. And I think that's a core of what I'll discuss today, Rick, and has really been my passion for the last 10 or so years. And the Federal Acquisition Service, they have multiple products. And what I do is I compare them to make it really easy. I either compare them to a brokerage or a gas station. So when I used to tell the story about the GSA and FAST, when I first went out to the Air Force and no one knew about us, yet we've been an agency since 1949.
Yeah.
I'd say, hey, just think of us as a gas station. You can either pump the gas yourself or you can have someone fill it up for you. The tanks in the middle, those are our contracts. In those contracts, you can buy anything you want off of them. And then I realized you go to New Jersey, they make you pump your gas all the time. So
Yeah.
it just wasn't holding up. And so it's more of a brokerage analogy, right? So when you're investing with Fidelity or Schwab, they have mutual funds, index funds, individual stocks. GSA is very similar, right? And our mutual funds and our stocks and our index funds, those are giant contracts that allow agencies to invest their money in any type of service or product they can think of buying. And they can either use a full service broker, which would be the assisted acquisition service and soon to be the new central contracting in GSA, or they can do it themselves by placing orders off of these large IDIQ contracts. So it's very much an investment strategy.
Sure. And that gets into basically, hey, what is GSA, right? And what are the different mechanisms that the government uses it for? Maybe now is a good time to pause. Okay. So you've been with the GSA for a while. You were with the public building service. Is that right? And then you went into 10 years later, the acquisition service, the Federal Acquisition Service, both arms of GSA.
Yeah.
But we didn't really talk about, we just alluded to it. What is GSA? You mentioned this has been around since the 40s. So why was GSA created?
Yeah, there's probably different opinions on this. You'd have to look at the legislation, but I think the bottom line, GSA is an enabler of all missions across government, right? So they provide the administrative support, the management services that the rest of government requires to operate. So GSA is basically a force multiplier to other agencies and a place where the government can find efficiency when it comes to managing things like real estate and procurement. The fleet is a big thing within the GSA, where the GSA manages the majority of the government fleet vehicles, right? So minus parts of DOD, any car on the road has been either leased or acquired by GSA, who is then leasing it to another agency so they can do their work. So think of it as like this G&A bucket that allows government to really be efficient in these administrative matters, but also in mission related matters as well.
Administrative and mission, but is that as it relates to procurement and spending?
Yeah.
Because I always thought of GSA as the organization that was created to either centralize or streamline procurement for federal agencies. And then from its original concept has evolved into doing different things. So it never, I don't know if that's the history you understand, but maybe it's been a little long since I've read through the books that made it down college, but I feel like it never really took over all of the procurement for all the federal agencies, but like you said, enabled them or made it easier for certain agencies in certain areas.
Yeah, certainly originally GSA was a mandatory source of certain supplies and services around procurement. So the global supply program within GSA, it's housed in what's called general schedules and supply. It's called GSNS to me, right? So it's housed in this one portfolio today. It's going to be housed somewhere else differently. That used to be mandatory for agencies to use back before Clarence Cohen happened in the 1990s.
So for supplies, so what would you define supplies as?
So pens, paper, anything that you can buy as a product, anything that is, anything in a product that you can think of, wrenches, tools.
So if my Air Force office if I just needed office supplies, I couldn't go to, when it was mandatory, I couldn't go to whatever they had back in the 90s Sears and buy office supplies. I would have to go to GSA and say, hey, we need 1,000 pens or whatever it was.
So then in the purchase we made and delivered to your office.
Okay.
And same thing with real estate. Real estate in back then was GSA was a mandatory source. And for the most part, it still is today.
And I just want to click here. I'll throw some questions up periodically. And by the way, you could throw them in here with this interview with Kevin. But yeah, so this was a question from one of our students about USA spending. And hey, where's the information on GSA on the USA spending website? So, one of the things that you just need to be careful about when you're researching, right, is depending on the tool you're using, and Kevin, by the way, who came from GSA, will tell you that the teams at GSA, or at least the one that he was on, they would use GovWin IQ, which is amazing, right? Because GSA owns like SAM.gov and USA Spending and all that. They had them all built. So it struck me as really ironic that GSA was using something like GovWin IQ, which is pulling the data from the websites that GSA has out there and just maybe using it to do their own research. You need to be careful when I look at USA Spending and I'm trying to figure out who I'm selling to. If I see GSA come up, if I see Federal Acquisition Service come up, you need to look at those numbers and figure out if that's telling you that GSA schedules are being used to put something on contract for other agencies, right? Because you may get a false positive. You may see that, and people have come to me and like, hey, I'm targeting GSA. I'm like, no, you're actually targeting the Air Force who's using a GSA schedule to do that purchase. You just need to be careful because GSA is a federal agency, but it's also, right, they also have these contract vehicles and whatnot. And don't assume you know how these government websites are presenting the information to you. Right. We all know what happens when we assume things. Okay. Back to Kevin on our GSA interview. This is a sneak peek on the full interview, which will be coming out next week.
But there are exemptions and agencies have much more flexibility today in the real estate space.
Yeah. I mean, it's well, at least when I think of GSA, one of the confusing points for me, which I mentioned at the beginning, was, okay, this is a different agency? Because I remember seeing you show up in my office. So I tell people I flew for the first half of my career. So I'm showing up to acquisitions as a major, almost lieutenant colonel that had been flying, and I knew nothing. So I'm learning really fast.
You were working with Maddie too, so it was going even faster.
Maddie is a legend, and I need to bring him on.
When you bring him on, you better bring me on too.
Yeah, I'll bring you on too. We'll have a GovCon Happy Hour, and we could talk about it. Me and Maddie actually went to the same private all boys Catholic high school. Only he went about 2 decades before me, and
he is an old man, and I hope he is watching this, so he hears that from me.
I'm going to send him the episode. So I'm just going to tease everyone. Maddie, there's the Ben Kenobi of government contracting that probably one of the only people I'd say knows more than even Kevin is. It taught me everything that I did. But I'm not going to drop his last name because I don't want him.
No,
that's my resource. But yeah, so I remember seeing you show up and be like, hey, this is Kevin with GSA. I'm like, oh, that's great. And talking about like, hey, using GSA to put stuff on contract. What I was thinking is a program manager who had contracting officers. I'm like, why do I need another organization to do any of this when I have contracting officers and I have engineers and finance people and everything? But then what I learned as I was going through this is the government can't just put somebody on contract. We need a way. The government needs and this is what makes it complicated for businesses to understand. We need a mechanism to put somebody on contract for anything. That mechanism could be a open competition where a solicitation comes out and 100 companies submit a proposal, and then we have a team of people who review everything, and then you win a contract. It could be, like if you're an 8A company, it could be a sole source contract, right? And there's a mechanism, there's a law that allows us to do that. But then there's a variety of things like contract vehicles and government-wide GWACs, big contract vehicles. There's GSA, which I'm putting that category, but it's not. It's a little bit different.
Putting the GSA prep checklist in the comments just so you have access to that if we reference it here in the conversation. So that should go out to you depending on which platform you're watching this on right now.
Different. But now these vehicles, you as a company can apply to be on a vehicle or on a contract. And so for something that's not GSA, like a NASA suit, maybe every couple of years, a solicitation comes out. You have to wait for the solicitation. Then you have to compete. It's a pain in the butt, right? You eventually get on or not. And once you're on it, it doesn't mean that you actually win anything. You haven't, all you are is you're on a contract that has a ceiling where the government can spend up to a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
$5 billion doesn't mean you get any of it. And now when the government, if it was for cybersecurity services, if the government wants to buy cybersecurity services and that agency can use like a NASA suit contract, all it means is now if the government decides to use that vehicle, you have the ability to bid on that opportunity. GSA, I like what I soon learned is companies can apply to be on GSA basically at any point, unless you guys restrict it, but I don't know if that. It could take a while.
For the schedule, yeah. The schedules, it's evergreen. The contracts are always open to bid. But and Rick, I think of it as in hierarchical terms.
Yeah.
You've got large, and for people watching this, there's a type of contract called an indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contract, and they're typically multiple award. When the government tries to do a single award one, they have to justify it for specific purposes. So for the most part, they're multiple award contracts. And you have these large umbrella IDIQ contracts, and there's different versions of them across government, agency-specific IDIQs, and then you have government-wide type IDIQs. And those IDIQs sit at the umbrella level. And then below those, that umbrella level, you have specific tasks. And again, they could be just under an agency specific one. They can be just for the agency. Under a multi-agency IDIQ, they can be for multiple agencies. Under a government-wide, they can be for any agency under the government. And GSA has the largest government-wide IDIQs because that is their mission, right? Is to put those government-wide contracts up so agencies can be more efficient and quicker to buy the services and products that they need. And
Any agency, meaning anyone can use it.
Any agency.
Right.
And in the case of the schedules, even state and local and certain nonprofits can buy from the GSA schedule. So
That's
the
interesting.
multiple award schedule program, the abbreviations MAS, because we all need abbreviations and acronyms in government. You call it MAS or the schedules. That is a government-wide strategy for contracting to create efficiency at a government-wide level for procurement purposes, because it's expensive to build IDIQs.
Yeah.
So if you do it at one time at scale and allow contractors to bid at any moment, you're theoretically being more efficient in terms of operating a contracting office.
Yeah.
Contracting offices are very expensive to run.
If I could give an example, right? So as I was working through going back, putting my Air Force hat back on. So, hey, why is Kevin here? Why is GSA here? Why do I need it? So I would realize in what I've told businesses is you want to give the government as many ways to buy from you as possible. Like that is what is going to increase your opportunities. And I realized, and I was doing tech development at the time, there were companies that I wanted to put on a contract that I couldn't, meaning they weren't. And hey guys, just wanted to pop in. You're seeing a preview of the interview I did with Kevin from GSA on whatever device you're watching right now. So all the changes coming up with GSA, he's really giving us some insight as to what you need to be thinking about, what kind of companies really need to be looking at GSA that maybe you weren't before. As we see some of the changes with President Trump's executive order, what are the agencies doing right now? So we're going to be getting into that a little bit further. Some of the questions that we're getting right now about the GSA prep checklist, it's in the comments, guys. So you can just click on the link and get that if you're just looking at obtaining the schedule or what some of the requirements are there. You also go to the GSA website, which is where you need to go anyway. Where do I find more on GSA? That's one of the questions. So what I would tell you is either download that checklist, or just go to GSA.gov, frankly, because GSA.gov, that's going to walk you through it. And when you go in there, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. There's a drop down that says sell to the government. Okay. And you can navigate
your way over to where way more detail is going to be in there. If you just want the quick, oh, hey, Dry Creek, our changes in the prep checklist. The prep checklist, I just dropped the link in there for you. The prep checklist is just if you're listening to all this and you're thinking, hey, maybe we should start looking at preparing to apply for the GSA schedule. What are the requirements? What do I need to have as a business? That's a good, just kind of from top to bottom, just if you want like one resource you can click on real quick. But if you're serious about doing it, you want to either go to GSA, which is what I recommend everybody do, or there are people out there that specialize in this that you can hire. All right, back to the interview.
On contract with the government, they didn't have a schedule. They weren't on our IDIQ because we would put IDIQs together, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So after my meeting with you, Maddie, the Ben Kenobi of acquisitions, he explained to me, hey, if a company is on GSA, if they are already on this schedule, then now we can go to Kevin and Kevin can work with us and to get them on contract. They've already been through the vetting process. So we don't have to do a 2-year or a year long or however long it's going to be to build a contract out, to compete it, try to get them on. They're already on with GSA. And by the way, not only are they on the schedule, but now they have people that can actually manage the contract for us and handle the effort, which to your point does take a lot of the work out of the hands of the acquisitions office. And it's amazing for the companies because it gives them a way they can go into a government office and say, hey, I'm on GSA if you want to use that as the contracting mechanism.
Or yeah, Rick, most agencies are using the contracts on their own. So their program management, project management, and contracting officers are acquiring whatever they need directly from the contracts. Now so GSA FAS is $110 billion or so organization a year. It's grown 50% in the last 5 years overall.
Oh, wow. And by the way, also I want to put a bow on this history lesson, right? Because it went from original concept of GSA, mandatory for things like supplies till the 90s, then maybe not mandatory, but it has grown. GSA is used for a lot of things beyond supplies, right? Can you give me like a 1 minute from 90s to now, like what is GSA involved in and why is it grown 50%?
Yeah, I wasn't around in the 90s. I was still in high school, but and I probably got the history completely wrong, oversimplifying it. But, so the big picture is it's a $110 billion organization today.
Okay.
When an agency doesn't have a procurement shop, they can go to the assisted acquisition service. And that's a $10 billion organization. And they do all the acquisition for an agency from planning to execution and administration. But most agencies are just using the contracts. And like, I'll give you an example. So my team, a few years ago, when I was still a regional director, I had moved on later in my time with GSA to be more of a national director. Well, at the regional level, my team worked with the Air Force, and we supported the Air Force in buying the cloud. So Cloud One for the Air Force, we worked with them to make sure that our contracts could align with their needs and to show them how the market would play out within certain contracts. And they ended up using one of our GWACs, the Alliant 2 vehicle. I think it is the Alliant 2 vehicle. They purchased that Cloud One originally off of Alliant 2. Now, I don't know where it is today, but that's one example, right? So that's a multi-million-dollar, more than millions of dollars acquisition that the Air Force used our vehicle for.
And what is Cloud One, just for anyone that's not familiar?
So yeah, that's the Air Force's version so the Air Force needed cloud services. They needed infrastructure and they needed the ability to
Can I ask you a question since I brought up SAM.gov? So, but a lot of people people that are in, for instance, our GovClose certification program, we spend a lot of time on researching federal spending, identifying opportunities early when the RFP comes, stuff like that. But SAM.gov is used for some of that. One question for you, for the audience is, do opportunities that are coming out on GSA schedules, so if I'm a schedule holder, my company went through the process with GSA for, I don't know, whatever it is. I said cybersecurity before, services or something, but let's just say it's something like that. I know that I have access to an opportunity that's going to come through GSA to bid on it if it's going to be competitive. Does it go through SAM.gov as well?
99% of the time, if it's being put on, the requirement is being acquired off a GSA contract, 99% of the time you will not see on SAM.gov. Once a contractor is retained under a GSA schedule or one of the GWACs, they have access to another set of tools that allow for them to have insight into what type of requirements are coming off those contracts. So that the main tool is called eBuy, GSA eBuy, and that's where they would be seeing requirements. Now, obviously, there's service providers that are commercial sort of software that can track all of this. So in GSA, believe it or not, we used GovWin a lot to see across, and I'm not endorsing GovWin or anything like that. We even used a service to see across all of the requirements and do research, but we used it from a different perspective, right?
Yeah, this is what I was talking about, that they used GovCon IQ at GSA. Just so funny to me that that the agency that built some of these tools that we use, right? Because if you've been in the public sector for a while, you probably know like the source of truth for a lot of these RFPs and RFQs is going to be what? SAM.gov, right? For research and data, it's going to be like FPDS, USA Spending. But there's tons of information there, but trying to sift through it all, that's really the challenge. That's where the skill set comes in to actually come up with using that data to help you sell to the government, to help you plan for what's coming. And even the agency itself is using paid for tools to sift through that data, because GSA, what he goes on to explain is GSA actually has to sell to other agencies, right? They're selling the GSA services to other agencies, which I think is part of the reason. I mean, it's kind of whether or not you think GSA should be involved more, GSA is a federal agency, so they shouldn't be selling to other agencies. I mean, this should be, hey, we're using it or we're not using it. I have a feeling this is part of what we're seeing here with President Trump and the executive order. But we'll see how this all shakes out, because there have been also cuts to GSA, just like other federal agencies. And we're talking about giving them a lot more work. So
we didn't use it for research for our own contracts. We used it to understand what the other agencies across government were doing, so we could help them be more efficient. So if we saw, for instance, the Army standing up a giant IDIQ, we would then go in and say, hey, do you know that you can meet that same scope under GSA Alliant 2, 8A stars, and even the GSA schedules? And so you don't have to build it yourself, right?
Yeah, that's interesting that you guys were even using a GovWin IQ. We teach within our program, have done a bunch of videos on using USA Spending, which I'm assuming GSA also runs. Is that usaspending.gov? Did you guys?
USA Spending, yeah. So that was the USA Spending was built by our technology transformation service. I actually spoke to the contractor that built USA Spend the other day. He had a really interesting story. I'll have to connect you to him at some point.
Yeah.
The architect of that brilliant person does a lot of work with GSA. And yes, so we do run that, and we run SAM. And the backbone of SAM is a commercial product called MicroStrategy. You may know MicroStrategy because they're the fourth largest owner of Bitcoin in the world.
Mm.
Their software is where you can organize and grab data on the back end of SAM as well. And that's where a lot of these companies are pulling data from. They take API into SAM, or they're actually going into SAM and manipulating it on the back end through these tools that are really easy to use. But when you don't have 100 people on your back office doing this, it's much easier to go to a company that does this as their bread and butter.
Yeah, GovWin IQ. I mean, it's expensive for any small businesses out there, but it's really good for research. And when I'm doing this type of work for companies, it's much easier. For instance, just an example, if I go into USA Spending, I can pull. And by the way, I'm saying this out loud because hopefully you're going to say, "Hey, Rick, you're missing something. You can hit this magic button and get what you need." But like, okay, let's say I'm looking at a NAICS code in USA Spending. It could be for anything, right? The construction services. And now I could go into each of the individual, let's say I look for construction anything under a NAICS code for the past 3 years. It'll show me all the solicitations. It'll show me like spending by year.
Right.
It'll break me down. It'll show me the agency spending, and I can have one kind of way to go and look at the sub agency. But if I want to know the exact office, for instance, that is doing the contracting, I have to go open up an individual contract, which it has in there, and I can look and it'll show me like the office code, or
Right.
say like Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, blah, blah, blah.
So all of those codes, Rick, are managed at a OMB, and there's like a hierarchical like coding for it's. You see it play out in FPDSNG, right? You have contracting office codes, you have program office codes, you have funding office codes. That's a hierarchical data structure. Like, so if I was to build a CRM, I would build my CRM accounts based on that structure, because you want to align with government when you're selling, right? So you want to know, this is the funding agency, this is the program office, and this is the contracting office, and these are the codes. And so when you're doing your research and then you're filling in your CRM, you're aligning perfectly, you're accurate, right? So you have a basis. And that's how I would do it. And that's how the government does it. So just for context of those codes.
Oh, yeah. No, and I mean, I guess my point was just, if I'm a company and I want to know which office specifically I'm selling to, right? I can get some of that information from USA Spending. But if I want to know, like, okay, I want to know the government office, not the service. But if I want to know, like, down to what program office is like the number one spender involved with construction, that's putting out solicitations and shit like that for construction services.
Yeah.
I can go to GovCon IQ and it'll break it down from top to bottom with specificity. I'm sure there's a little like,
or you just know it's PBS or BA or DOD. I mean, I know Army Corps does it, but those are the three.
Yeah, those are big picture. But like, if I wanted to know that, like,
you go to GovWin and break it down that way. And we have data scientists in the back end. I was lucky enough to have access to just data scientists that did that all day long. So I missed those days of being able to see. So our folks, every year when we were doing this, right, we would go and look at expiring contracts and pull all expiring contracts out of SAM, which comes from FPDS, right? Then we would go through a prioritization of those expiring contracts based on the attributes we were looking for, whether it was fixed price cost, was it the right NAICS code, did it fit our contracts?
Yep.
And then we would prioritize based on relationships or where we had them. Then based on that priority list, which we built in Excel, then we would populate it into our CRM and form our plans to then go speak to those agencies and influence them to move away from the open market and spend under GSA because it was more efficient for government.
Now that's interesting, because now we're talking about, so it's funny, GSA, the federal organization, using that data to target other federal agencies to get them to use GSA. We talk a lot about how companies can use that data to find.
Yeah. And I think
I
think the new administration sees how ridiculous that is.
That is ridiculous, right? I don't want to say it. I don't want to I'm not going to.
No, it's ridiculous.
That sounds insane to me. Like, why is a federal agency, you're basically marketing to you're building a CRM, you're marketing, you're trying to sell and GSA to other federal agencies.
Whether you're building a CRM or not, you need a CRM to manage relationships no matter their goal. So I tell people this story. My dad, he's got one of these beautiful minds, right? So I come onto Odyssey the other day, and there's a woman who works out at Hanscom Air Force Base, and she's presenting to us. And I called her afterwards because
All right, guys. Hopefully this has been good for you. That's just a preview of the conversation I had with Kevin. You can see the full interview next week. If you have any quick questions, you can drop them in there. But I certainly want to wish everybody a great weekend. If you're watching this on Friday here, because we're live right now, and I'm going to take that video off right there. We'll get that out to you at the latest by next Friday. But I think that the main point here is just staying abreast of some of the changes that they're recommending. And I think what we're really seeing is things are calming down, right? So there's a lot of rhetoric out there. There's a lot of things that we want to change. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to the fact that the U.S. government and the Department of Defense have been spending money for hundreds of years. Acquisitions reform is something we have tried over and over again, and we do make changes for better or worse. And same thing, GSA. We may see some good changes over the next year or two. We may see little change. We may see some dramatic changes. I have a feeling it's going to be very measured. And knowing, like we talked about, and like you probably heard him, although I'm not sure he mentioned it there, but he does go into the fact that it's the companies that are selling goods and services that are not directly tied to the mission. Those are the ones that they're going to be pushing onto GSA, or at least that's the intent. So my perspective, when I'm advising my clients and I'm teaching our students in GovClose, is if you are a company that falls in that category, you need to be prepared for when the agencies possibly do transition over to GSA. And since it takes so long, at least as of right now, to get a GSA schedule, to get on some of these contracts, you need to start preparing for it now. I would be, if I fell into that category, I'd be getting a schedule just to have it. Because the worst case scenario is nothing happens with GSA, meaning if you get the schedule and GSA, there is no increased use of GSA, well, it's still used. Like the schedules, contracts, they're still used. And if you have it, you're giving the government an additional option to put you on contract. Also know that just because you apply to be on one of these schedules doesn't mean you're going to get onto it, right? It's a process, and there are parameters that you need to meet. I would just say this, that we have a saying, if you've been on the government side for a while, there's a waiver for almost everything. So, if you see something and you're not quite sure, hey, I just don't meet it, I'm almost there, but you can reach out to us. We have advisors on this specialized in GSA. I can put you in touch with the right people, but there are certainly situations where you could obtain a waiver for something that looks like it's a hard and fast requirement, right? When we peel the layers back on government contracting, when we start looking at the federal acquisitions regulations, what GSA wants for applications, there is usually a lot of gray area, and we may see some changes as to how GSA operates and brings people on. Absolutely. And by the way, if you do get into our system with one of the checklists, you certainly, you'll be put in there. We can set up a call. I can put you with one of our advisors. We do have some great, by the way, some new tools out there. And just to give you kind of a snapshot of what I'm thinking about as far as selling to the government over the next couple of years. If you're not following our content, or maybe you're kind of half listening to the news, and you've been hearing about like budget cuts and cuts to federal agencies, here's what we're also hearing. Increase in defense spending, increase in the manufacturing base for Department of Defense. Sorry, I was just reading a text. So targeting the Department of Defense, you may need to move and retarget who you're selling to. We are also seeing GSA potentially increased use of, right? So if you fall into one of the company types we discussed earlier, you may need a GSA schedule, or you may want to get it just in case. And other transaction authority, increased use of that, especially for software related things. So that's what I'm looking at, right? Those are some of the things that I'm looking at. I also think there's going to be no change in a lot of areas. I think a lot of this is going to be very standard. And, as we preach here, find your opportunities early, find them before the solicitation closes, and go after each in a structured and measured way. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Thanks for hopping on here, and we will see you next week. Cheers.
After going through the course, I was able to land a client that pays me a monthly retainer to actually help them develop their business and go after these federal contracts.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community.
Within 2 months, I had my first client. So the initial contract was for a 3-month contract for $4,000 a month.
So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal. Is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely something, probably my best investment I've made all year.
A cold call landed a 9-figure
government contract, start a consulting business, and a high salaried position as a account executive in public sales. So you're doing both of those things.
I'm living the best of both worlds right now.
So my name is Mike Knickerbocker. I am a naval officer that's getting ready to retire. Right now, I have 3 firm clients and 2 more perspectives. I'm able to provide value across different industries because the skill set that I learned through the course, I was able to apply my own experience.
GovClose came and it was a no-brainer. I wanted some secret sauce.
This has allowed me to live in Germany. It's a little hazy today, but we can do that. You see?
Oh yeah, dude, that's beautiful.
The content, the training, it's invaluable. It's written.
And Deb, what motivated you to join the GovClose certification program?
Wow. Well, I think that wanting to work with a leader in the field, someone who understands government contracting on a deep basis and has the reputation, the experience working with you and your company was a natural.
The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high-paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video.